IVM.
Today I'm starting with a quote. A neurologist and the best-selling author Oliver Sacks once said, "I always wanted to get people's stories and access to their lives." Being a neurologist, he studied brains and behaviors. He said, "I feel as if I am at the interface of biography and biology, person and personhood." Chote muh badi baat, but so many times I feel the same way when I analyze people on the basis of their handwritings. To transcribe an intangible thought onto the paper, it has to go through multiple processes: chemical reactions, nervous system signals, motor skills, careful mind-body coordination, and much more. All these biological factors unknowingly give away parts of writer's life story. In short, his or her biography. Welcome to Absolutely Right, the first graphology-based podcast show in India. I am your host, Aditi Surana. I am a graphologist and a high-performance coach. Have you experienced this? You're going about your regular day doing things the way you generally do, and suddenly, without your knowledge, the craft, the process, the recipe just takes over and goes beyond you. It turns outstanding in ways that you wouldn't have ever imagined it to be. Today's conversation with Ragini Kumar somehow turned like this. Ragini is an executive producer with Star Sports and has years of experience in TV industry. From producing live news to scripting, anchoring, conceptualizing shows, and much more. I was introduced to Ragini because of her wonderful, soothing, thoughtful Hindi poetry podcast called Zindagi Diaries on IVM Network. In today's conversation, Ragini and I spoke about multiple things. From the Border Gavaskar test series to anxiety to handwriting strokes that depict second guessing. Can you imagine? As you listen to this episode, pay attention to the segment Autograph Please, where I describe the gaps in Ragini's personal and professional behavior. You may learn something interesting about yourself. We all have at least two personalities, if not more, public and private. The specific differences between your handwriting and your signature can reveal some interesting stories. As you may already know, I'm doing a 5-week signature analysis series on our segment Graphology Tool of the Week. Today, let's talk about the signature where the writer signs beautifully, clearly, neatly, and then suddenly, without any reason, decides to scratch the whole signature. Do you know what it means? Do you have the stroke in your writing? Do you know someone with that stroke? Let's talk about all of this in that segment. Ragini will join us on the other side of this short break. Stay tuned.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another great, awesome, amazing week on the IVM Podcast Network. If you're not following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Would like to thank the sponsor on the network this week, Storytel and the Whole Truth Foods. We have a new show out this week, Candid Kannan with Siddharth Kannan. Sid K is a well-known RJ. He has an incredible show with some of the most amazing Bollywood celebrities. As part of the first week's episode, we're releasing 5 episodes at one time, so you can get your fill of Sid. You can hear him talk to Varun Dhawan, Anil Kapoor, Anurag Kashyap, Bhumi Pednekar, and a whole lot more. This week on the Edges and Sledges podcast with Varun DJ and Ashwin, hear them talk about the historic victory that India achieved at Gaba. Maruk Inayat had an amazing talk with Gul Panag. They spoke about the farmer protests and why Bollywood celebs are acting the way that they are. And finally, Shunya 1 is back this week. Shiladitya and me talked to Anirudh Singla from Pepper Content. We have a great lineup of guests coming up in the coming weeks, including Deepak Abbott, the co-founder of India Gold. Definitely check that out. And with that, let me get you back to your show.
Hi, Ragini.
Hi, Aditi. How are you today?
Very well. Thank you so much for joining us today. And before
Pleasure is all mine.
Thank you. So before I say anything about your handwriting, I want you to analyze the match and give us your view.
Oh, I work with Star Sports as an executive producer. So producing cricket, watching live games, analyzing them, making shows is something I've been doing for last 16, 17 years.
Wow.
But I must tell you that this match, there is no way I could have seen it from an executive producer's point of view, a professional point of view. It was all heart. I was a fan. The emotions couldn't stop. While speaking to you, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about that moment. I just felt so lucky that I could witness that moment, even if though, it was on television, and with my family, it was so special. We were all together glued to the TV and we couldn't believe that we're witnessing historic moment, and with just so much, undertones.
Right.
Of,
True.
there were so many debutantes, there was racial abuse. We did so poorly in the first test
course.
match. And, this was not even our best test playing 11. Oh,
true.
I think it's a culmination of everything that has happened.
And representing 2020 in cricket.
Oh my God. Yeah, I think life, just life. And I can go on and on, so let's move on.
Wow. So, I look at your handwriting, and as you're talking about it, your work requires a lot of passion. Your work requires you to be not only creative, but also at the same time be very precise. And I look at your handwriting, and there is one particular trait that jumps out. That is your ability to observe things carefully. You're highly observant. So if you're moving at a lightning speed, even in that situation, you're highly observant. And people are like, but you were there for 2 seconds, 2 minutes. Yeah. How did you observe this? But you did, because you're constantly absorbing information, constantly looking at things and people, and try to create patterns, which very few people are aware of. Like, you really study patterns underneath their behavior, their way of speaking, anything people do.
That is true. And I think my son, who's 5, he always says, Mama, how did you know I did this? You were not even in the room. So
right.
Maybe you're right in what you said. Yes, I think it's also something that keeps me up, and like my mind is always working.
Right.
Because I've observed so much. I'll remember tiny details about people, and there'll be questions that'll nag me. But she mentioned this, but that time this hadn't happened. Right. How did she say she went here? So a very detective mind I have.
I was about to say, and the stroke that I'm referring to is the detective stroke, which is investigative, observant, and analytical at the same time. So if I have to break it down, this is what we get. And I know I should say this technically, after we exchange some more information, but I have to say it right away. If people, khuda na khasta, if people get into a fight with you or an argument, then all these files are opened right there, and there is no way they can survive. To our listeners, I must say, she's laughing and she's already pink.
That's true, but that is something I have now consciously worked on. It might be going on in my mind, but I've trained my tongue and my speech to not match the same vibrancy with the frequency, not vibrancy, the frequency of my brain. I'm like, okay, I know I'm firing bullets in my brain, but I'll have a smile on my face now. I have worked on that, but yeah, you're bang on.
So, do you have any questions for me?
I wanted to ask you, 2020 and now going into 21, things have changed drastically. I'm sure it's something you get very often about anxiety. It's now a feeling like you feel hungry, you feel anxiety. Right. It's become that common and that obvious in the way things have happened. So while writing or through my handwriting, is this something that you can tell me about, this anxious mind of mine?
Interesting question. And, I must say that last 9 months, we have done our most work in public domain on anxiety. I have never spoken about anxiety so much the way I have in these months. And, with all due respect, all of us had different forms of meltdowns through this process. Now, when we look at anxiety for you, now what is anxiety? It's a pattern which is repeated and it becomes uncontrollable physically, emotionally, mentally, and it works at all these 3 different levels simultaneously, right? And they may or may not be connected. So you feel palpitation in one form of anxiety, but you can feel something else when you feel anxious about some other issue. So your body has a pattern, but we have to be really, really attuned to pick that pattern and then break the pattern. Okay. So in your case, because you love challenges. So we asked you to write on a blank sheet of paper, and the way you wrote, you literally fill the paper completely, but also to the edge, right side of the page. We call it right margins. When a person goes very close to it without crashing it, that means you love risk taking. You love adventures. You love not knowing what happens in life. You love that game of guessing and figuring out and applying yourself completely. Now, 2020 is difficult for you, not because it was more complicated, but actually because in your case, it did not provide you enough challenge. Okay, so you did not know how to deal with yourself when you're not being thrown into situations that you have to manage and survive and find a breather in. You don't know how to live life like this. And thereby, the mind, which had all this extra capacity, unused capacity, had to use it on something. So it used on everything possible.
You are so right. It's like, you're my soul telling me everything. It's that accurate.
Thank you.
That is so, so true. Wow. Yes, after I wrote those lines, I actually realized that the paper's now full.
Right?
There's no space.
You observe that. Great. But you understand, it's not. We always think that I'm anxious because life is tough. In your case, you're anxious because life is not tough.
Yeah. True.
And you have more to give, more to express, more to create than what you were creating.
Yes, I think predictability bores me and scares me. So I think, the sense that you got in 2020 was like, okay, this is how it's going to be.
Right.
Now you work around it. I think that was scaring me that, it's going to be very predictable every day.
Right. And not only predictable, the whole idea of learning and reinventing yourself and discovering who you are in a given situation is what you thrive on. Okay, I'm going to talk about a small stroke that is available. According to me, great leaders have this one particular combination in their writing. When you write the word the, any formation where T and H are next to each other, if the letter H is even slightly taller than the letter T, then your ability to learn and your ability to mold and constantly question your norms is very, very high. So let me repeat this. It's a little technical. If the height of letter H is slightly taller than the letter T, then the person has the ability to really, really learn in any given situation. Now, I have found this stroke with many leaders. And when they write, they think, they solve problems, they thrive when they're given opportunities to explore themselves. And that is applicable to you too.
Good to know. I'll let my husband know also.
Please. I don't think that is his problem. He's still dealing with the first problem of arguing. So I don't think he worries about learnability and all of that.
Again, you're damn right. You're absolutely right about it.
Thank you.
What else can you share with me in terms of the way I write? What are the other things?
Okay. So as I was, looking at your writing, one aspect that how do you manage to deal with stupidity or people who are stupid around you? I think that's very, very interesting because one, you are non-forgiving towards...
Okay, I thought I had changed after 35. As I said, wisdom comes after, on the other side of 35.
Okay, so we'll try and believe that, but no.
Okay, I'm not very forgiving when it comes to being stupid.
Yes, you are okay when people are like struggling, if they don't understand and they want to ask questions. But if you believe that somebody is not putting in enough efforts, you become extremely impatient. And if we have found you being controlling, then it is only in the face of stupidity.
Okay. I will take it with a pinch of salt, but yeah, it's there. It's there.
One aspect about, when you write your letter F, you make both the loops complete most of the time, but sometimes the lower loop is more prominent. Okay. When we look at F letter like that, where the only lower loop is more prominent, that talks about somebody's ability to execute to the T. And it's only like when you make a plan, some people are great at planning. In your case, if people give you a plan and if you're supposed to execute it, you will make sure that you follow all the timelines, you get all the moving, ducks in a row. You'll somehow manage it. You'll sit on top of it and you'll figure it out. And that is your skill that professionally people have counted on, people can really, really connect to, and that makes you extremely reliable.
Oh, that's fascinating. I chose the word fascinating. F.
Great.
Wow.
I want to say one
Amazing.
more thing. Now, we
Sure.
all know on IVM you have your own show, and please tell us something about it. But before that, there is a handwriting stroke that talks about your ability to write. And I want to talk about it. So when you write your letter S,
Yes.
it has two loops, which means it begins with a little tail. It makes one loop on the top, then it comes down, makes one more loop, and then connects to the other letter most of the time, which is a rare formation. Not everybody has S with two loops in it. Now, people who have been listening to me and to the show, we talk a lot about one stroke called Kamasutra Stroke or calming handwriting therapy, which has the same formation, which we call flow of thoughts. Anybody with that kind of writing naturally in their S or even letter F at times actually innately have the ability to write, to create, to connect, to communicate, and that flow of thought is present within your thinking. And now poetry is your form of expression of that.
I'm falling in love with every line that you're saying because it's so scientific and it's so beautiful the way you explain it.
Thank you.
I don't know how to explain it. And it's very rare that I fall short of words. It's very rare, but this is stunning. S. I chose S. Stunning. Wow.
Yes. I'm going to go through multiple letters right now because I want all the different adjectives then.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it. I mean, then you can help me pick the right words because I'm really at a loss of words. And this is...
Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you so much.
Amazing. Amazing.
So tell us about your show.
My podcast is called Zindagi Diaries. ये हिंदी में है ये podcast. और मुझे जैसा आपने बोला लिखने का बहुत शौक है. I love to write in Hindi or in English. But I started writing poetry in Hindi and some short stories. बहुत सालों से लिख रही हूँ about things which I have forgotten from my childhood, things I miss from my childhood. So a lot of nostalgia in most of my poems. Trying to connect to what we have left behind. We're just so busy moving ahead.
Right.
That we tend to forget the beautiful times we had when things were not so complicated.
True.
So most of my poems are about that, about nostalgia, about ek choti si mulaqat, ek प्यार भरा इजहार, दरिया किनारे कुछ हुआ. ये सब ऐसे emotions मैंने जोड़कर I've written about 20 poems and there are 2 short stories there.
I've heard at least 10 of them non-stop and so beautiful. It's just beautiful. So guys, please check out her podcast. And if you love Hindi and if you love the whole expression of seeing beauty in simple things, I think this is a podcast to listen to. And I'm so happy we have a Hindi poetry podcast. It really doesn't happen. Thank you for doing it.
Oh, please. I'm grateful to the IVM family for giving me an opportunity.
So, next question for me.
The next question is that, again, it's a universal thing, I feel, with us. I get confused when I have to take a decision sometimes. Maybe not professionally, as you said, but, for myself. Sometimes I see a menu. It's very basic. But I have the hardest time deciding what to order, what I want to eat. If somebody asks me what you want for breakfast, I cannot decide. I can't decide what I want to wear. Just these small things, I find it difficult to take decisions for myself. But if I have to take decisions for somebody else, my son, my work, how will I travel to office today? How will I do this? Then I'm very clear and thoughtful and I know. But when it comes to me, I find it very difficult. I second guess my thoughts.
Okay. So 2 parts to this question. Again, interesting question to look at because so many of us do this, right? We do not know what exactly we got to do in micro choices. And I keep saying this with couples when I analyze them together. Like marriages or relationships are not broken over big things. They're always in these small things about deciding what to eat, what to wear, how to deal with really, really micro things in the house. Now, why do we do that? Why do we have this conflict between what we wish to do and what we wish to, why do we waste this time in between? Fundamentally, in your case, you write in an angular manner. When you connect your one letter to other, they're like these, you can see the sharp clear triangle or angular formations there. What do they mean? They mean analytical thinking to the T. So whims and fancy for this person, any writer like this, is not your best friend. You may get an inspiration, but if you want to choose something which does not have any logical reasoning behind it, you struggle there. With bigger decisions, you know exactly what you're doing and why you're doing it. What would be the repercussions? You've thought through the consequences, and you love exploring it because you have some support system to go back to. But small things, what to wear, there's not necessarily a big logic there but imagine if you have to decide something for an event or some big presentation. You don't think about it second time, I believe.
No, you're absolutely right. No, my biggest problem is deciding on a menu. You are right. I will think 100 times. If I order this, what will happen if I order that? It's just, I don't know.
I'm going to give you
exhausting.
a small tip. And I do that at a larger level when people decide their life goals or whatever like that. And also at smaller level. Before you walk into a situation like this, ki aapko khana kya hai aaj? Just ask, get that clarity. What do you feel like eating? It's not so again, going back to your way of dealing with information, you require reasoning behind making your choices. Most of the time, menu mein koi reasoning nahi hota. Most people decide, mera man kar raha hai. Now you are like, oh, what is that? Man kar raha hai kya hota hai? Koi to reason.
Man kaise kar sakta hai? Kuch to socha hoga. Man ne kaise soch liya?
Exactly. So the brain function is so active that you do not want to quickly get to decide anything that you do not have clarity about. And that is probably the only small hack here, just to get a sense of what would you like to, what kind of thing. So not don't decide on the dish, but probably ask yourself, do I feel like spicy? Do I feel like bland? That may help you.
This is going to be a very, very helpful tip. I'm learning so much through this podcast. It's a godsend. It's amazing. I have another question if we have the time.
Yes, please. Yes, we do.
I find it very difficult. Again, I was an anchor. I used to anchor.
Right.
So obviously speaking and communication, as you said, comes fairly easily to me. But if I have to speak about myself in a social gathering, about, I have a podcast or this is what I do. And I find it very difficult. It's very awkward for me to, talk about my achievements if there are any, or anything that compliments me. I find it very difficult to say it socially.
Okay. So that connects me to the next segment that we want to walk into anyways, which is called Autograph Please. Now, Your signature talks about your public image, whereas your handwriting talks about who you are. Right? So the question that you asked me is about how people perceive you matters to you, and you process it differently. And if you are supposed to present someone else, then you are all confident and you can describe them in the best possible light. But to take that light on you, something goes off, and let's talk about that right away. So let me first answer your question and then I'm going to move to the segment. When you write your signature, you write Ragini as your first name, and when you write that R, particularly that R, and even for our listeners, they'll understand what I'm saying, because you retrace one of the lines in that letter. The vertical line is retraced, which means you first started on the top, you take the line all the way to the bottom and you retrace it, and then you start your formation. Now that retracing is almost telling yourself, and this is a very subconscious code, right? It is not something that you did it consciously. You don't even notice this. You didn't even know till I explained this. But as you look at that stroke, as I look at it more as a technical, how blood report comes and you don't know what those numbers mean, and the doctors looks at it, okay, you have this thing, that thing. So I'm looking at your writing from that perspective. Now that retraced R talks about whatever you do, especially for yourself, you do not tend to be assured of your action. So you need to walk that path, that retraced path again. But Ragini, if someone pushes you to tell something about yourself, or if they say, okay, that podcast I heard, what is it about? In that case, you know exactly what to say, and then you're not uncomfortable. But retracing talks about not being sure of something that I am doing. And I probably need to relook at it, review it. And in this case, it's not about your work. That first letter in your signature represents you as a person. So that retracing, or if I may say second thought, second guessing, comes only when it is about you.
Wow. I'm not going to retrace this R anymore, for sure.
Please don't. That would help. That would definitely help.
And the way I write Kumar, that's...
So let me talk about, so signature has so many different aspects. So if I have handwriting where I speak about 800 traits, signature by itself becomes a code, and that code is your entire identity. So it's not only in the way you write, but where it is placed, and every micro stroke matters. Now, Ragini, I do not know whether you know this or not, but people around you are aware of it. When you work with people, when you talk to them, they find you extremely impatient. You want everything done yesterday. You cannot even wait for today to happen. You're like, but why is it taking so much of time? We must do this. We must get on top of this. And people are like, what's happening here? Why are you rushing? And in your personal life, by the way, most of the time, you are the one who would be procrastinating things. You're not rushing at all, but professionally, publicly, something goes on in your mind, or some button is switched on and you suddenly become actively impatient. How do you manage to do it?
Aditi, I cannot wait for my husband to hear this podcast. He's your best friend. He will be your best friend.
I was about to say, I think we should talk.
Yeah.
He and I. Yeah.
He can, and so that brings me to another question, the dichotomy of a professional Ragini and a personal Ragini.
Yes.
That, again, I don't know. That's very surprising and interesting. And I think that's something I need to delve into.
I must say something here. It's not only about professional and personal, it's also about private and social. So the very moment you walk into that social image, that social identity, you change. And it's a switch. It's a micro switch. You might be talking to somebody in the house and you turn and you just, it's almost like somebody saying camera, action. And you just get into that role and start behaving like the social Ragini. Now I must say this, all of us do it. It's not only you. All of us do it. In your case, the behavior is peculiar, and only people who are close to you can see both of them, because social people, social circles won't have access to your personal edition, if I may say.
Yeah. The switch going off. Wow, that's very, very interesting. Yeah.
And when we have these gaps, subconsciously, unknowingly, we keep serving these gaps, which means we hold ourselves in a particular way, and we do these role reversals or exchange unknowingly, and that gets to us. Most of the time, work stress is about having to be someone else when I am at my workspace.
Yeah, that I can understand and relate to. Yes. Even if the work is not asking me to be that, but I think there is some kind of conditioning or expectations from your own self that you give in to that pressure. No one's putting that pressure on you.
Also, we craft ourselves like that. This is where the human mind is so complex and so beautiful and unending as you look at it. Because when we understand ourselves from other person's perspective, we want to be seen in a particular way. We feel that is what is expected of me. And in your case, you take that mandate very seriously. You do not let that drop, no matter what.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that one as well. It's like, you have all the right answers. You are 100 on 100 on everything that you've said, Aditi. It's amazing. How can somebody be so accurate?
I think it's a subject of graphology more than anything else, Ragit.
Wow, it's just brilliant. Can you also talk about health from the way I write?
Not fully. There are people I know who have studied medical graphology. I haven't found enough research to support that, so I do not incorporate that in my conversation. However, the stress that is lingering, especially in last, I would not even say 9 months, not from the lockdown, especially in last 3 months, the stress is aggravating, and you're probably, till that point you could see something and convince yourself that the hope is on the other side. But in last 3 months, you are feeling confused more and more, and you're feeling that you're losing your conviction. Now you do not know how to be, how to behave, how to work without that conviction. Going back to the logical point, you require to have that mandate, that clear definition of why you're doing whatever you're doing. And the fact that this is not giving you that, you're not able to maneuver your car in this situation.
Wow. Amazing.
So what I would say here, please start journaling. This would really come handy. Now, when we are confused, we are kind of weighing 2-3 options in front of us. And the question here for you is not which one would you choose, but actually about why each choice matters to you so much. So again, I'm not saying what will happen in the future. Most of the time, it doesn't matter as long as we have the conviction within us to deal with the situation, right? So take a step back and start journaling every day. Probably I can think about a question right now is ask yourself, if I wish to create my life, especially professional life, in a certain way. Now, certain way could change and what that way is. But if I wish to create my life in a certain way, what do I require to look at? Because there are so many things in the speed at which you work, at the cost of that journey, you haven't looked at. And what you saw, what you experienced in last 6 months is you kept seeing those aspects of you that you didn't know existed within. So it's time for you to find an outlet. And I believe handwritten journaling can do a great job. It will come really, really handy, and you will feel all the bottled up emotions can find an outlet, and you will thrive also because you do a great job with your flow of thoughts only if you call upon them. So you got to do that.
Wow. I am already thinking about my first journaling. It will be about this podcast, I assure you. And I think it's going to take, for 2 hours I can write. I've had so much fun.
My God.
It's
I'm
really
so
like,
happy.
no, it's really like you have unlocked me in the most simple way. It's,
Thank you.
You're wonderful, you're blessed, you are talented, and you are just fabulous.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I think a lot of credit goes to graphology as a subject, because though it is not known, it has its own mathematical way of calculating. So probably what all I have done is practiced it a lot over the last 16 years. But fundamentally, the subject has the potential to do it.
Well, maybe I'll pick it up, be your student.
Please do. Would love to have such an inquisitive student in the class.
Again, even in my personal life, sometimes, if my mother or my father-in-law, anybody in my family, if they are narrating me some story, I'm like, Acha, but why did that happen? I'll ask questions. They're like, we didn't ask them this. I said, then what's the point of you telling me this story? Why are you telling me this story if you don't have the answers?
Right. They're not reporting the story, by the way.
Yeah, that's what I said. No, you should. It's like, please, ye reporter ka kaam ghar pe mat karo.
Exactly.
But what's the point? As you said, logic. You are giving me useless information. You're not giving me the important information. Why are you bothering? Why? Don't do this.
Yeah, you remember what I said? Your impatience with... I don't say, stupidity again, but you know what
कि वो इतने बजे आ रहा है हमारे घर. अच्छा, कौन कौन आएगा? खाना खाएंगे? Should I prepare dinner? वो तो मैंने पूछा नहीं. Great. Then let's go with your plan.
Yeah. There is this sarcasm dripping in every word that you just said.
Oh, yeah, that's my other problem. Like when I genuinely give compliments, people are like, please, Ragini, yaar, why are you being sarcastic? I said, no, I mean it. I love your dress.
So you've trained every single person around you so well. They know what is coming their way. They're always ready to deal with it.
Yeah, it's just like, come on, yaar. I genuinely like it. So yeah, that's the other problem I have, Aditi. You're right.
This problem, I don't think there is a hack. You'll have to live with it.
I'm telling you now, wisdom,
I must say,
other side of 35.
Other people have to live with it.
Yeah, I know. So I better be really nice to them.
I should create a small program for them to deal with it. Thank you so much for being on the show. It was lovely talking to you and so much fun. Thank you.
It's one of my most favorite experiences, and the best part is we started talking. We started this podcast with one of my favorite experiences of India winning down under and retaining the border Gavaskar Trophy. And I can tell you, I'm ending this podcast by saying that this has been truly one of the most memorable conversations for me.
Thank you so much. On the other side of this short break, I will be talking about writers who treat their signatures like a scratch card. They write these graceful strokes and whoop, they just come back and scratch it. Let me tell you what it means about the writer, about how they think, and especially their inner dialogue. Stay tuned.
Hey, I'm Zarina, your peak performance coach, leadership coach, and life coach. And I'm here to unleash that power within you with your weekly dose of mantras and empowerment. Tune in to Monday Mantras every Monday for your quick fix, and the Empowering series with Zarina Poonawalla every Thursday for riveting real-life stories. You can catch us on the IVM Podcast website, app, or wherever you get your podcast from.
As a child, I loved doing Rangoli. For all non-Indian listeners, Rangoli is a form of art done on the floor, mostly outside the main entrance of the house in India. People make some stunning, intricate patterns with colored rice, flower petals, and quartz powder on special occasions like Diwali. If done well, each Rangoli takes about 2 to 3 hours. And if you have ever done it yourself or seen the amount of efforts and patience that goes into this, then you will relate to the example I'm about to give. Every year on Diwali, when the guests enter the house in a happy, festive, appreciative mood, they look at this decor and Rangoli and compliment it. But then, by the end of the night, after being exhausted, sleepy, overfed, or just careless in general, at least one person, yes, no matter what you do, at least one person accidentally turns blind momentarily and obliviously walks on your Rangoli. And by the time you try to stop them, it is already too late. And then they say things like, sorry, I'm so sorry, I didn't see it. Obviously you didn't. Right. My Rangoli was the only place on the back of this planet where you had to do all your Bharatnatyam moves. But they're the guests, you can't say much. Now over to our graphology tool of the week. This writer, the one I was describing, who gracefully writes all the letters in his signature and whoop, in one stroke scratches everything that he has created, is identical to this Bharatnatyam dancer who dances all over the Rangoli. He puts in an immense amount of effort to do the work, to get all the detailing required, almost manages to get all the ducks in a row. And with that single stroke that scratches all over the signature, whoop, he destroys all the work he has done. Now here is the tricky part. Most of these writers are completely and absolutely unaware of their own behavior. The irony is, they look at their bosses, their colleagues, their spouses, even their family members and wonder why these people discount me, dismiss me, criticize me, or even ignore my contribution in spite of all my efforts. If you have the stroke in your signature, then for next 1 week, observe your own self-dialogue. Do you know what self-dialogue is? It is that inner conversation that you're having with yourself, that mental dialogue that is going on, the way you speak with your mirror or in the shower or anywhere when you're alone. You'll be surprised to know how many self-sabotaging, self-critical statements you make without your knowledge. You, of all the people, keep puncturing your own confidence, your own self-worth. Now, there are 2 critical questions here. Why would you do that to yourself? And secondly, if that is so, how to stop it, how to deal with it. After speaking with numerous people with this type of signature, I have learned that self-criticism is a coping mechanism. Most of these people shared that they were brought up in a highly disciplined, harsh, or even critical environment by very, very strict parents, family members, or even teachers. They got so used to being criticized that their inner dialogue subscribed to this style of speaking. They remain stuck in that internal loop. Most people remain stuck and trapped in their own self-dialogues without their knowledge. And no, because just blindly removing the scratching stroke from your signature without dealing with the deeper self-criticism issue is not advisable. It's like removing the crutch without letting your leg recover completely. Now go ahead, think about your inner dialogue, observe your signature. In the meanwhile, use this handwritten journaling question to assist your introspection. At the cost of repeating myself, let me say this. A solution-oriented handwritten journaling process is one of the best way to build your awareness about any behavioral pattern. Now, once you spot your inner dialogue, after observing it for 3-4 days, journal on this question. What are the 3 or 4 ways for you to rephrase that self-critical sentence? For example, if you're saying things like, I'm so stupid, I'm so useless, how can I even think about it? Now, just pick that sentence and see every time you feel like saying it, what are those 3 or 4 things you can say instead? Healthy self-dialogue is a practice. You will have to train your mind into it. There is no way around it. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Absolutely Right. In the next episode on Friday, in our relationship series, I will be talking about how breakups can become your new ground of self-discovery. As announced earlier, from 12th Feb onwards, I will be doing special couple analysis sessions. You can enroll for these sessions to decode and understand all your fights with your husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, or partner. Our new graphology masterclass batches will start on 6th Feb and next one on 6th March. You can find all the details on aditisurana.com. If you like this podcast, then don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on IVM Network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on our social media. We are at IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Let's connect on Friday with one more episode on relationship. Till then, happy writing.
Namaskar, dear friends. My name is Ashish Vidyarthi. Life, as you know, is a journey. And you and I, travelers, how can we celebrate this travel? I have a podcast for you. Begin the journey. I share stories and moments from my life. Do tune in every Monday and Thursday to listen to my podcast on the IVM Podcast website, app, or wherever you get your podcast from. Cheers.
Come learn and experience the ABCDs of being queer with me, Shinetro,
and me, Farhad,
on our show, Gay BCD.
The two of us take you through our stories and experiences of being gay men in the city of Mumbai and have candid
and sometimes downright scandalous
conversations about sexuality, gay culture, and everything in between.
Catch new episodes of Gay BCD every Tuesday on the IVM Podcast website, app, or wherever you get all your podcasts from.